Hello, everyone. Matt here, as always, along with Christian, and we are here with a very mishmash kind of last minute thrown together cubic dimensions. But when is that never the case? Uh, yeah, I kind of forgot that we did this show and just flooded Christian with a bunch of stories. But anyway, we are going to start talking about stuff. So, first story that I'd like to talk about, Christian, it's the second link down, the New York Times look at Trump,
Yeah,
potential Trump administration.
yeah,
So, in the since we last had our show, uh, President-elect Trump has announced several members of his cabinet and staff that he plans to have in the White House when he gets there on January 20th. Now, not all of these that he's already announced will actually uh, might be there just because he might have a tough time confirming some of them. So first of all, for CIA director, he has nominated Mike Pompeo, Republican representative from Kansas, who is on the House Intelligence Committee and has been a very strong critic of Secretary Clinton after the Benghazi attacks. Let's see, how long? Yeah, he came in during the Tea Party wave in 2010. Next is Attorney General, which we're going to talk about. Uh, Attorney General, which is Jeff Sessions, U.S. Senator from Alabama, who was one of the first people to come out in favor of, to endorse Donald Trump. Then there's National Security Advisor Michael T. Flynn, who was an Army Lieutenant General, and at one point the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which I've never heard of. But he surprisingly is a Democrat, and yet again, we're going to get to him later too, and yet he is clearly incredibly prejudiced, incredibly, well, not in line with the values of the Democratic Party, which is very interesting.
well, that's why I
Prob-
got selected.
yeah, probably only a Democrat because he was appointed by President Obama, the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, so maybe that's why. Reince Priebus, the current chairman of the RNC, who originally was a sharp critic of Trump, is now going to be his chief of staff. Of course, the person who's caused the biggest hubbub is the executive director of Breitbart News, Stephen Bannon, who's going to be his chief strategist, which usually means deputy chief of staff. Other than that, he hasn't announced anybody else, but leading contenders for Secretary of State are John R. Bolton, someone that George W. Bush tried to appoint to be UN ambassador, who was even too radical for the Republican Congress at the time, if you can believe that. Rudy Giuliani, former New York mayor, Nikki Haley, current governor of South Carolina, and surprisingly, Mitt Romney, who we're also going to get back to in a little bit. Treasury Secretary, most likely looking at Stephen Mnuchin. I don't know how you say that name, but he's used to work for Goldman Sachs. Surprise, surprise. A lot of names floated for defense secretary, namely James Mattis, and I want to say Duncan Hunter, as well as Kelly Ayotte, surprisingly. Interior Secretary Jan Brewer, leading contender for that. Agriculture Secretary, okay, this is perfect. Sam Brownback. That would be great. And then the rest kind of no names, except for Health and Human Services, Mike Huckabee, Bobby Jindal, Rick Scott. They're big names for that. And then, Homeland Security, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who recently lost re-election to like his 7th term. Rudy Giuliani is also in the mix for that, as well as David Clark, the Milwaukee County Sheriff, who he had some very interesting things to say at the Republican convention this year. And then Kelly Ayotte is also being considered for UN ambassador. So that's just a few. There are more, but those are only the ones that are of really any consequence at the moment. But so first, let's talk about Jeff Sessions, the first really controversial pick on this list. So Jeff Sessions has been a senator from Alabama since the state was founded, aka he's old as hell. Actually, no, sorry, only since 1997. So he's pretty old, but he hasn't been senator for that long. But he's going to be Attorney General, maybe, sort of, even though Rand Paul has actually said he would not. He'd cause some ruckus if through the nomination procedure. But he is controversial because he was actually nominated for a federal judgeship in 1986 while he was I believe he was a U.S. attorney, in which he had some very interesting comments that he made. Yes, he was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Alabama at the time. And here, let's pull up this New York Times article real quick. Okay, so keeps moving around. So he said, quote, "The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is a piece of intrusive legislation." He brought voter fraud charges against 3 civil rights workers while they were trying to register black voters in rural Alabama. And that prosecution turned up about 14 doctored ballots out of 1.7 million. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, he said, quote, "Good people don't smoke marijuana" in a Senate hearing in April. He's endorsed the idea to ban Muslim immigration. He's proposed a plan that would raise the federal prison population by as much as 30%. And yeah, I believe there were some other comments, but I can't find them here that he made, basically saying, hey, they're not all thieves, but most of them are, in reference to black people. But yeah, that's going to be your next attorney general.
Yay. We're doing progress.
Do you have any specific comments about Jeff Sessions?
No. I think what's been said stands for itself. There's no insightful thing to say about that. Okay.
Michael Flynn, he's tweeted, yes, he's followed the president-elect's sort of mantra of tweeting his feelings. Tweeting saying stuff along the lines of being afraid of Muslims is rational.
Oh. Okay.
So clearly this guy hasn't, left anywhere but his white suburbia that he's lived in probably most of his life. Steve Bannon, of course, is the most controversial pick so far, because, I guess some people can quote what Michael Flynn and Jeff Sessions have said in sort of, hey, that was back in the day, or we live in a world where a lot of international terrorists, the people that Michael Flynn was dealing with while he was in the army mainly, tend to be Muslims. So, and there's still both horrible arguments.
Yeah.
But, it's enough to sway at least some people. I don't know how you make Stephen Bannon look good. I don't think you can. He's just such a bad guy. Have you read anything on him, Christian?
I've not had the chance, no.
So he's the writer in charge of Breitbart News, which is one of, Think Drudge or InfoWars, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Although I don't know if he deserves that courtesy.
Well, I think it works best.
When you let him sink his own ship.
Yeah, exactly. Be like the media and just have, oh no, oh God, okay. Headline in Breitbart: Stephen Bannon, zero tolerance for anti-Semitic racist elements of the alt-right. Well, your website has fed the alt-right, so.
Yeah. It's funny because now they got to get some legitimacy going for Breitbart now, I guess, because they want to have him win. Probably too late.
He was quoted recently with saying, "Darkness is good."
What?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Don't get me wrong. Evil is good. Evil is good. Dark and stormy nights, folks. Dark and stormy nights. That's what I'm running on.
I'm not a white nationalist. I'm a nationalist. I'm an economic nationalist. Yeah, that doesn't make me feel any better. Globalists gutted the American working class and created a middle class in Asia. The issue now is about Americans looking to not get fucked over. You have probably in reference to Trump, you have probably the greatest orator since William Jennings Bryan, coupled with the economic populist message and two political parties that are so owned by the donors that they don't speak to their audience.
The greatest orator since... Okay. Trump is many things. A great orator is not. I don't know those many things.
Reince Priebus praised Steve Bannon on Monday, calling him, quote, very wise and smart. Okay, apparently now that he's the chief of staff to Donald Trump, he has to also talk like Donald Trump.
Very wise. Very smart. The smartest.
I can't find... Okay. The Times of Israel even has a thing on him. Quote, when 2/3 or 3/4 of the CEOs in Silicon Valley are from South Asia or Asia, I think, Bannon said, trailing off, a country is more than an economy. We're a civic society. What?
I'm so confused.
What the fuck is he even talking about?
The basis of that is wrong. The basis of that is wrong to begin with. What is he even doing?
I don't even know.
You know what's going to be fascinating about this entire, next 4 years at least? Just the fact-free presidency. Like, it'll be great. We're going to require that at least 80% of the companies in Silicon Valley are run by Americans. Mr. President, that's already the case. We are requiring.
No. Then he's gonna say, "See, it already happened. I didn't even need to do anything.
It's already working. That's what happens when you elect me."
Well, that's what he said. What was it? GE.
Yeah.
That's what he said about GE, because he said, "Oh, look, GE's not moving to Mexico. That's because I did that." And GE's like, "We weren't planning to move to Mexico. What are you talking about?" I don't know if it was GE. I want to say it was Ford.
It was.
I can't remember. It was Ford. Okay, thank you. But yeah, Ford's just like, we never wanted to move to Mexico. What are you talking about? Why would we want to? They literally were like, why would we want to move to Mexico?
Mm-hmm.
That makes no sense. But anyway, yeah, Steve Bannon, bad guy, naturally. And so he hasn't directly said a lot of the things that people are upset with, which is, I guess, probably a decent sort of your only deflection for that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that doesn't matter. He's the chief. He's the editor-in-chief. So, basically, more or less, whatever gets posted on Breitbart has to go in front of his desk first.
Yeah.
And these are headlines that say stuff like, the Jews run everything, and, three thugs, thugs, and calling black people thugs, and sometimes even the N-word.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not even code anymore. It's not code with this guy. It's just flat out racism.
Yeah.
And this guy is going to be, besides the chief of staff, the right-hand man to the president of the United States. Now, so the interesting thing about all these guys, we'll get to the other guys later, because none of them have been confirmed yet as who they're going to be. But an interesting thing that I saw was, so let's just take Steve Bannon and Jeff Sessions, right? The two most
egregious, I guess.
Egregious picks. Even though Michael Flynn, Reince Priebus, and Mike Pompeo are still pretty disgusting in their own right, people have just, for some reason, focused in on Stephen Bannon and Jeff Sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just take those guys, right? Yeah. Well, people are saying, hey, we need to stop their confirmation. Well, Stephen Bannon doesn't need to get confirmed, but, they're saying that Trump needs to walk back, that he's going to pick Bannon and all that stuff. And an interesting thing I heard was someone say, no, let him. Just let him have the guys he wants. Mm-hmm. And let that make the case for why he's going to be a bad president. Like, just let these guys have his ear, because these guys are going to be the downfall of his administration, along with himself. And I guess that's a silver lining. I guess that's a good thing to do, is just let them set fire, feed the fire of the sinking ship. I don't know.
Well, I suppose that's a matter of, you would say that if you're like, because you don't think they're going to do too much damage. But if, a war with, if you like end up in a war with Iran, or, you see like another case like Ferguson, and then like the federal government comes out and says, yeah, kill him. So like, if you have stuff like that, where people's lives could be on the line, then you're like, maybe just writing off the next 4 years is not the best plan.
Yeah, see, this is a similar discussion like what we had with when we were talking about who we'd rather win,
Yeah.
Clinton or Trump, because we could have 4 years of the same old kind of safety, like, okay, the country isn't going to melt down, but it's not going to be in a great place either, versus this, we're literally, like, he's going to be the last president of the United States.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. I feel like this is a similar sort of discussion.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sure which I'd rather have, because as much as I'd like to see, these guys who are utterly repulsive be a part of his administration, so it does fall apart because of them. And, when 2020 rolls around, it's pretty clear he's not going to win.
Yeah.
At the same time, also, Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, I don't think the next worst person he could have picked would be the zombie of George Wallace.
Yeah. Pretty much.
I literally can't think of anybody else who would be worse.
Yeah. So that's the balance you're trying to match there. Is I could easily see just some things going so horribly bad with this group of people, because it's funny because at work, I didn't know this, but there was a guy who was a Trump supporter there, which you don't get a lot here. But he was like, why are they going on about how they're trying to make all these guys, even the little slightest thing they've done wrong, trying to say they're racist. And I'm just like,
make them.
They did these things, and some of these things are legitimately very worrisome. So my thing is, even if they themselves don't necessarily do anything terribly wrong, I think you continue to perpetuate the problem of we're normalizing this, we're making this acceptable. I think if there's a good thing that could come from this, it's seeing people like Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul in the vanguard of the Republican Party, in a sense, or at least the old Republican Party, coming out and saying, no, there's got to be a line.
Yeah.
I think getting those people, people who are kind of traditional, who are Republicans, who are, aren't necessarily cool with Trump, to sort of say, oh, wow, really, this is actually a problem, and then trying to reform the party in some way. I think that's the good thing that could come of this, because I think the I don't see. Yeah, I just think it would be so bad if they actually got in that it's not worth the potential. I think Trump's going to be bad anyways. Mm-hmm. I don't think we need them to make it that much worse.
I suppose so. Yeah. All right. Well, okay. Yeah. That's a good point. Okay, I just want to talk really quickly, because we have been talking about this for a while. So I just want to take it to really quick Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
So there are already plenty of other bad choices that he has on here: Rudy Giuliani, John Bolton, Stephen Mnuchin, or whatever the fuck his name is, Jan Brewer, Sam Brownback, Jesus Christ, Rick Scott, Mike Huckabee,
Rick Scott,
Joe Arpaio.
Joe Arpaio, what?
I know, exactly. There are already so many
bad names being floated around.
Yeah, that it would take too long to cover them all. But anyway, I just want to talk really quick about Mitt Romney. So Mitt Romney met apparently with Donald Trump recently. I want to say it was either yesterday or 2 days ago.
I think it was yesterday. It was on at work.
And so here's the great thing. I was reading this in Reuters, and Reuters said that, back in March, April, Mitt Romney was quoted with calling Donald Trump a fraud, a con, and a phony.
Yeah.
when Mitt Romney is calling you those things,
Yeah.
you know there's a problem.
Yeah.
Because Mitt Romney is all of those things.
Yeah.
And now, apparently, yesterday, look at this. He's with the president-elect, Donald Trump, at his, fancy-smancy golf club in New Jersey, doing him, I don't want to use the metaphor because it's graphic, but you know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Just pleasuring him, trying to get him to make him Secretary of State or something important.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. Throughout the 2012 presidential election and before that, I had a mixed opinion of Mitt Romney. I thought he was, a little bit too opportunist, but could be good on some issues. Now I am and when he came out against Trump, I was like, oh, thank God, at least, he has the sanity to be against him. I have lost any ounce of respect that I had for Mitt Romney before this.
Yeah.
Because this sort of phoniness, to use his word, this clear just sucking up to try to get ahead is absolutely disgusting. If Mitt Romney was a real Republican, he doesn't even have to worry about getting elected to anything anymore.
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham, Rand Paul do.
Yeah.
And they've totally alienated Trump supporters.
Yeah.
If he can't be a profile in courage like they are and stand up to Donald Trump, he deserves nobody's respect. He is a sad, pathetic man.
And you know what? A lot of people said, well, Trump can't be that bad because the Republicans will reel him in. I think there's too many Mitt Romneys in that party for that to be true.
There's way too many Mitt Romneys. I mean, his new chief of staff, Reince Priebus,
Is a Mitt Romney. Yeah.
He's Mitt Romney in every respect. He was totally against Trump when he first announced, and he almost started to do everything that he could. He even teamed up with Mitt Romney to try to get a conservative third party, or a significant conservative third party, to run against Trump once it was clear that he would have the nomination. And then the second that he won, the second that he was clearly going to be the Republican nominee, and then he did win the election, all of a sudden it's, Mr. Trump, I love him. He's a great guy. He's very smart and nice.
Yeah.
Very wise and smart, whatever the hell he called Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
Absolutely pathetic.
Yeah. That's what I got from this that really worries me, is the slow realization that these guys just want power. they didn't. It should be like a warning shot to anyone who actually thought these guys stood for something. No, they don't.
Here's a quick pivot to another story and something Christian and I were talking about earlier. So we saw a kind of sort of similar thing with Elizabeth Warren during the primaries, where she didn't endorse anybody. Mm-hmm. And unlike Reince Priebus and Mitt Romney, she actually had a significant following in her party that could definitely sway the election one way or the other.
Yeah.
And she chose not to, because she knew she wanted to be good with the winner, because she wanted to see her agenda put forward.
Yeah.
Pardon me. And Bernie Sanders has kind of done a similar thing, where Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer, the outgoing Senate Minority Leader and the incoming Senate Minority Leader, he got them to back his choice for DNC chair, Keith Ellison. Yeah. And in return, he's backing Chuck Schumer, very establishment, very Clintonite, for Senate minority, and not challenge him like many people, including myself, wanted him to, because he wants to see his agenda forward.
Yeah.
Now, well, here's where the false equivalency dissolves, because they're not like Reince Priebus and Mitt Romney who want a job, right? Who just want to have their names in the history books one last time.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren did these things because they want to see their agenda pushed because they actually care.
Yeah.
They actually care about seeing shit get done. And for the betterment of the country, for the betterment of the American people.
Yeah.
So I guess that puts it in perspective.
Yeah. I think, nonetheless, it's still a mistake. And the reason I think that is because for people who aren't actually into politics, it doesn't matter if you can see the, like, political, like, maneuvering there. I think a lot of people dislike that. And I think that's a mistake on their part. I think Elizabeth Warren will certainly, if she does decide to run later, which she might not, so maybe it's fine. I think that is something that will be impossible for her to actually shake off. Same thing with, doesn't matter for Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders is probably done with this whole running thing. But I think for Elizabeth Warren, I think that's a mistake. Even if it might be in the better good of her agenda right now, and maybe that's all she's thinking of is, look, I can't promise anything in the long term, so short term I'll just do what I can, but I don't know. That's how I see that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd like to see how it unfolds. Personally, and maybe it's just because I'm biased, because I really like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, and also because she's my senator, I can forgive this. Both what she did and what Bernie did, because I know they're going for the greater good.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's a good point to be had for that you make, that it could bite them later on.
Yeah.
And I really think, if Elizabeth Warren had endorsed Bernie Sanders, especially early on in the race, it could have swung the election.
Yeah.
Pardon me. But I think that she recognized that if she wanted her agenda pushed, she'd have to either back Clinton or or not do anything as she did, because not only would it piss off Clinton, it would piss off all of her supporters in the Senate, of which there are many.
Yeah.
I believe the only U.S. senator to endorse Bernie Sanders was Jeff Merkley of Oregon, and even he had to backpedal from that because he realized, especially once it was clear that Clinton had won the nomination, because, he has an agenda, he wants stuff done, and if he doesn't have the favor of the party nominee, then so goes his agenda.
Yeah.
And that's the really screwy thing about politics, is that it's, especially I think with the Clinton people, but generally with a lot of people, it's very personal. It becomes very personal, which I find very annoying, because more often than not, it's when people back certain candidates over others, it's not personal. It's because they simply like the other guy a little bit more. When it came to the state rep race in which I interned for the Challenger, it wasn't because I didn't like my current state rep. I think he's a cool guy.
Yeah.
And I voted for him this November, not that hard because he was unopposed. But I did so with pride because I thought he's a cool guy. I just simply preferred his Challenger more.
Yeah.
This, 2 years ago.
Well, here's an interesting thought then. I was talking to the conservative friend who I will not name, but I've named a million times. So if you watch this show, you probably know exactly who I'm talking about. But she was talking to me about that because I found it interesting how when you first get into it, she said that you believe in it, but then it slowly becomes a very like your job is tied to a person. So if you're if you're one of the staffers in the back end, when your candidate is attacked or some element of their campaign is attacked, you start to feel that personally, as if you and your work is being attacked. And when someone attacks your candidate, you take it personally because that's your job. Your career is tied to that person's success. And I think if you're that candidate, there's almost no way you don't get in that mindset yourself as well, because you're just surrounded by those people. They're your staff. So I wonder if I just wonder if that's how it becomes personal over time, is just that environment breeds it. It demands it almost.
Well, I think that really gets to why you shouldn't have so many sort of yes men, pedantic, not pedantic. I can't think of the word right now, but yes men on your staff. You should have people who are critical of what you think, of what you do, so you can have a more well-rounded view. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of politicians, especially Hillary Clinton, is that, I mean, look at their post-mortem that they did, a week after the election. They were blaming literally everybody but themselves. And, obviously that's kind of natural, because it's hard to be self-reflective, especially after such a unexpected defeat against such a disastrously inferior candidate. Yeah. But that's what you have to do. You have to be critical of yourself. When it came to the election that I was in, I did some opposition research, not only on the opponent, but also on my candidate, to find things that could be wrong with him, that could come up about him, because it's important to recognize the flaws in your candidate so you can be ready to push back against them. But it's also important so you know the weaknesses of your candidate and know, these people aren't gods. Yeah. As great as Elizabeth Warren is, as great as Bernie Sanders is, as great as Donald Trump is to a lot of people, they're not infallible. Yeah. They're humans just like you and me. Yeah. But I guess in order to be in politics, you have to be a bit narcissistic.
Yeah. Probably comes to territory.
Exactly. So anyway, let's pivot real quick. Unless, do you have any more thoughts on it?
No, I think I got my thoughts across.
All right, let's pivot real quick to different politics, just to shake it up a little bit. So tonight was the presidential primary for the French 2017 presidential election for the main opposition party, Les Républicains, who are the successors to the UMP, which were the party in power when Nicolas Sarkozy was president. So, interestingly enough, here, if I can pull up the article real quick. So, basically, right after the 2012 election, which was the most recent election, the field for this more right-leaning French party became massive, because so many people were ready to challenge François Hollande, who right now has George W. Bush second-term approval ratings. Pardon me, like it's that bad. So
super popular.
Yeah, so there were a total of 7 major candidates, including Nicolas Sarkozy, but also including François Fillon, who was his prime minister, and also Alain Juppé, who was prime minister way back in the day. And interestingly enough, the primary for the Socialist Party is about 2 months away, and the incumbent has still not said whether or not he's going to run, which I find incredibly interesting. But anyway, obviously, Sarkozy, being a relatively popular foreign president, even though he lost re-election, you'd figure, he'd win his party's primary because he made this party.
Yeah.
He reformed the UMP into Les Républicains. So you'd think that he'd win it easily, right? Wrong. He came in third. It's not like he came in second. He came in third. Behind Fillon and Yup. And it's not like it was close either. Fillon won with 44% of the vote. And then Yup, I think, had 28%. And then obviously Sarkozy had a little bit less. But that is astonishing. Like, okay, first of all, prime ministers and presidents are supposed to be buddy-buddy, the ones that serve together. Clearly not in this case, but hey, French politics is weird. I mean, for God's sakes, you have a woman heading the fascist party there, which is really weird. But, or neo-fascist, whatever you want to call it. Like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I find that I just thought that was interesting. I'm always very interested in French politics, especially since Sarkozy's party, Les Républicains, recently in the 2015, I think it was, 2015 regional elections, which were about a year ago, his party placed first and significantly ahead of both the socialists and the National Party. Mm-hmm. So how that popularity of himself and his party just went whoop, I have no idea.
It's I guess the problem the French right might have, I suppose, is that the rise of a party further to the right is shifting that party's who's in it, and by that changing how the people who would vote for that party would think. I don't know necessarily what that means. I don't know if that means they're more left-wing or more right-wing, but I imagine that is having an effect.
Well, if you look on the title of the thing that I sent you, not the title, but somewhere down there, it calls Fillon a Thatcherite.
Yeah.
Obviously reference to Margaret Thatcher, former UK Prime Minister, who is significantly to the right. So, and apparently Yup is more to the left of Fillon. So that could be it. That could definitely be it. I know that in most polls, Yup is very popular, at least in the general election. He trounces Le Pen. He trounces Hollande. The only person who really comes neck and neck with him is Valls. Mm-hmm. And Valls hasn't said whether or not he's going to run.
Yeah.
So that could very well be the case.
It'll be interesting to see, though. I imagine Hollande's not going to run. That's my guess. If he has any sense, I think he won't do it for himself, and he won't do it for his party. Like, he has no invested interest in running. So,
see, I just don't get him, right? Because I remember doing a story back when this was This Week Has 1 Hour.
Yeah.
And we talked about Hollande, and this was when he was first starting to get really unpopular. I'm thinking like 2014. Mm-hmm. And he says, he, like, apparently him and his staff decided that they needed like a new a new approach to governing because
Yeah.
it wasn't going very well for them. And he said to the press, "Oh, well, I've never really considered myself on the left. I'm more of a centrist." And I'm just like, that wins you no votes, dude.
No.
Like I said it then, I'll say it again. That wins you no votes, and sure enough, it didn't.
Yeah.
If he runs again, which again we both say he probably won't, he is going to get absolutely crushed.
Yeah.
Like he's just done. Even if you have a sort of Finol Sarkozy thing going on where Valls enters the race along with Hollande, like it's going to be even worse than that.
Yeah.
And I just don't know what he's thinking. And part of why he probably wouldn't get reelected, yes, is the growing nationalist movement across Europe and indeed across the world. But if you look at his policies, if you look at what he's done over the past 5-ish years, he has absolutely no idea what the hell he's doing. And he has absolutely no claim to fame when it comes to the French economy or the French government. Like he's done. He's doomed.
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see. I just hope that the far right party doesn't pull off a Trump and win, because that is the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I just I don't know. I don't see. Well, okay, let's. What?
You don't see them pulling off a win.
I don't know. It really depends on who goes. Who goes to the general election, and who wins the socialist nomination. But this kind of goes along with another story that I wanted to bring up. Interesting story in The Economist I read. It's called League of Nationalists. Most of it covers the different sort of nationalistic leaders that are on the rise in different parts of the world, and doesn't really get to the point till towards the end. But it does give you a good summation of what's going on.
Yeah.
And basically what it's saying, along with a story by Thomas Piketty, famous French economist, talking about Trump and how we have to rethink globalization, but basically what this Economist article is saying, which I've kind of been saying, is that the people who support these nationalist movements tend to be older people.
Yeah.
They tend to be the old guard of these countries.
Yeah.
And they tend to be people who are seeing their country change dramatically.
Yeah.
And they're trying to, some like, and they also tend to be uneducated, undereducated. And, for some leaders like those in China and Russia, the appeal to nationalism, one to just kind of stay in power. They're already in power. They're just trying to stay in power. But for the most part, it tends to be, at least the nationalism we see on the rise in Europe and the United States, is this last breath of the older generation, right? The baby boomers.
Yeah.
And I guess the generation after that, in a way. It's their last hurrah, because they see their countries changing very dramatically. The United States is going to be a majority-minority country in, I don't know how many years. I want to say it's either 2030, 2040. And the thing is that it's not necessarily because these people are racists. It's not necessarily because these people are any sort of prejudice. They just see their country changing very, very dramatically. Yeah. And they fear for what that means politically, economically, and culturally. Because a lot of people use their culture as something they take pride in.
Yeah.
And when people who are not part of that culture, who introduce a different culture, are introduced into your society, and you're told by people you don't know, but are in charge and say, oh, well, you have to accept these people, and if you don't, you're a racist.
Yeah.
You're just like, well, what the hell? Like, let's hold on a second. Let's try to, as Trump has said, we need to stop and figure out what's going on. Yeah. We need to figure out what's going on. Like, as stupid as what Trump's as that sounds and really is, that's what these people are thinking. Is they're like, what the hell's going on? Slow down. Yeah. I didn't sign up for this. Right? Like, and it also, again, tends to be uneducated people. It tends to be people who are, do sort of minimal skill jobs, minimal talent jobs, that all of a sudden a lot of this unskilled labor is coming into their country. And unfortunately, a lot of people who hire them because they know they can pay them shit wages, give them no benefits, and get away with it.
Yeah.
Now, really, that means they should be getting mad at those people, not the unskilled labor coming in.
Yeah.
But that's not your immediate reaction. Your immediate reaction is, hey, why is this guy who doesn't look like me, doesn't sound like me, I don't know if he shares the same values as me, why does he have the job at the coal plant and I don't?
Yeah.
I've been here a lot longer. Why does he get it? And it's not, their anger is misdirected, but it's not like all of a sudden George Wallace just hypnotized half the population of the United States. These are very real concerns. It's a lot of misplaced anger, but it's real concerns.
There's actually a YouTuber who doesn't do videos like this, but he actually did a very good video on this topic that I think would be worth checking out. His name is Lindy Beige, if you have any...
Oh, I love Lindy Beige so much.
Yeah. But he did a video on this where he was like, it's very odd that if you're... Yeah, he was saying it's very odd that if you're on the right, you would throw around this anti-immigrant rhetoric, because really your business interests and your donors are the ones who are actually benefiting from it. And it's very odd that the left ends up being the defender of that immigrant group, because if the left is pro-labor, you'd think its base would be that uneducated, kind of worker in the country.
Well,
I found that to be an interesting thought.
That's exactly the problem. And Bernie Sanders talked about this shortly after the election. Jon Stewart kind of talked about this. A lot of people on the left have been talking about this, is that the thing about the Democratic Party, and I think we talked about this last week, is that it's abandoned the working class.
Yeah.
It's no longer, let's fight for working people, no matter what their race is or whatever. It's, hey, let's focus on social issues that everybody agrees on, or most people agree on, so we can try to appeal to all these minorities and get their votes. Now, that's not a terribly bad strategy. I mean, yeah, you should be as inclusive as possible. Mm-hmm. But they're getting ahead of the curve, because they know that in a few years, they're going to be able to win almost every election because, again, we're going to be a majority-minority country.
Yeah.
So they're thinking ahead of the curve and trying to get those people already under their wing. That way, when we do become majority-minority, Republicans don't stand a chance of winning any election.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad strategy. But the thing is that in the process, they've abandoned supporting any real change, any real, and they've abandoned, white people still have problems.
Yeah.
Working people still have problems regardless of any other demographic that they're part of.
Yeah.
And Jon Stewart also kind of talked about this, interestingly, on Fox News of all places.
Mm-hmm.
But he did kind of a retrospective on this too, and he said, you can't just throw this racist label around, and you can't just dismiss people's views outright because you think they're racist and racism is abhorrent, and you go through that logical conclusion. You have to think, okay, why is this person thinking this way?
Yeah.
And you can't just say, oh, well, it's because you're privileged and blah blah blah, and
yeah.
No. People's minds immediately get turned off when you start throwing different terms around.
Yeah.
You got to think, oh, well, maybe it's because they actually do have problems. They're not just making this shit up.
Yeah.
Like most people don't. And they're concerned because this is how they've come to understand the situation. Is it misguided? Yes. So try to explain to them how the situation is, how they should be thinking about it,
mm-hmm.
and how we can come together as a people to fix those problems.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, oh, well, you're a racist and your opinion doesn't matter. Like, if you want to say that to Donald Trump, okay. Or Stephen Bannon, because they actually are bad people.
Yeah.
But when you're talking to an average Joe on the street, that's not how it works. And this goes to something that we always talk about on this show, is that there's a disconnect between the politician and the voter. The politicians, more often than not, are the actual bad people. Voters, more often than not, aren't. They're just concerned for their own well-being, for their family's well-being, for their community's well-being. And sometimes they come to the understanding of how that works in unhealthy and misguided ways. But that's just what happens. So, yeah. And you don't get anywhere by dismissing them and calling them names. Because when's the last time, Jon Stewart said this perfectly, he's like, when's the last time someone called you a name and they changed your mind about something?
This is true. This is very true.
If you guys haven't seen that interview with him, please do. It's an excellent interview because he talks about more than just that. It's very good.
Well,
he does a very good retrospect.
Here's a random thought then. Is the United States in the state it's in because Jon Stewart left his show? Does the United States need Jon Stewart to go back on the air to save itself?
I don't think so. I think Trevor Noah has done a great job.
But the thing is, it's not whether or not Trevor Noah is doing a good job or not. It's whether or not Trevor Noah's voice matters. I think
that's true.
I think Jon Stewart's voice is so respected that he can frame the argument in a manner that is... He can make the same framing, but actually make people listen to it. That's the best way of putting it. Yeah.
I'd love for him to go on a speaking tour.
Yeah. That
would be fantastic. Like, if he did that, I think people would listen.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to go real quick for a second. Christian, you want to talk real quick about your prime minister, dude?
Oh, okay. So, well, I was going to tell Matt this interesting fact, but I guess I'll just tell you the interesting fact. So it's the 175th birthday of a guy by the name of Wilfrid Laurier, who was the longest-serving head of a party in Canadian history, one of the longest-serving prime ministers, And he's basically the prime minister we had when the U.S. had the first Roosevelt, Teddy. Good old Teddy. And just like Teddy Roosevelt, he was pretty significant in shaping how Canada came to be, which would make sense if he was prime minister from 1896 to 1911, which is a really long time. He won four consecutive elections and was prime minister for 15 years, which is the longest term, unbroken term in history. I know King served longer and Trudeau served longer, the first Trudeau, but he was the longest serving consecutively. But there are some interesting things to note about Wilfrid Laurier. Wilfrid Laurier was the prime minister that basically he was instrumental in turning Quebec into a left-wing province. That was largely came down to let's see if I can read that. Anyways, the Conservative Party was trying to appeal to the Canadians in the West, which was progressively more English. The Quebecois did not appreciate it. And he was like, yo, Liberals care about you. And they voted for him. There you go. He also was another big part of what got him to be that popular, though, was something called the, let's see if I can actually find the name of this. I don't know why I can't find the name of this. Here we go. This is it. I've found it. There we go. The Manitoba schools question. It was one of the first things he faced in 1896. The Conservatives in Manitoba were planning to get rid of the Catholic school board system in Manitoba. And the Catholics in Manitoba did not appreciate this. So he managed to intervene and negotiate to we'll have Catholic schools where Catholic people live. And for some reason, that was not something anyone had, that was a solution no one else had brought forward until he came there and proposed that. And people quite appreciated that. It was another big contributing factor in his popularity in Quebec, which, if you didn't know, really, really Catholic at this period. So that was a big deal. And basically what he called that, his solution was the sunny way. He called that, let me read exactly what it says here. I don't want to make stuff up by accident. He called his effort to lessen this sunny ways, which was, if you don't know, a big part of Trudeau's campaign was calling his plan sunny ways. And it just sort of added that term to the Canadian political vernacular. Also, a random fact, he met Diefenbaker once, when Diefenbaker was a kid.
Who's that?
Diefenbaker was prime minister in the 50s. He was buying a newspaper while he was in Saskatchewan, and the guy selling the newspaper was a young Diefenbaker. And he quite liked Diefenbaker. He was quite he's one of those kids who's very sharp and to the point, and he appreciated it. Anyways, that's Wilfrid Laurier. Perhaps one of his most famous quotes was, let me just make sure I get this quote exactly. I don't want to mess it up. This is how I feel right now, because I was not expecting to just do this story now. That's fine. This whole show's been that way. Let's see if I can get it. You think this is what happens when you don't have a website of quotes that was Canadian. Wow. Why can't I find it? Either way, I'll have to summarize the quote, I guess, which I didn't want to do. Anyways, basically he said Canada is free and freedom is its nationality, and that's one of his most famous quotes. There you go. Wilfrid Laurier, the one, the only. And that's all I have to say about that.
Cool guy.
Cool guy. Generally respected across the Canadian political spectrum, which is what happens, I guess, when a prime minister's 100 years back.
Yeah. Well, that's something Christian and I were talking about, is that uh, it's kind of easier to talk about whether or not a president or a prime minister or any sort of leader was good or not, and be more objective rather than just opinionated, the farther back they are. Because, of course, as you get closer to modern day, they become more controversial because, people still alive who remember the days of them and had a certain sense of how they were. In the United States, I guess you could say this goes all the way back to probably Richard Nixon, maybe Gerald Ford.
Yeah.
I suppose in Canada probably goes back to Trudeau, the first Trudeau.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty basically 70s and onward if they were in power.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, we got onto the really weird, just obsession people have with whether or not someone was a good president or prime minister when it comes to the party they belong to.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, especially once you get past the modern controversial era, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I really couldn't give less of a crap which party they were from.
Yeah.
At least in terms of U.S. presidents.
Well, there's the added element in the U.S. of the parties did flip if you go too far back.
Well, see, it's not just that they flipped. Like, they've gone through several different transformations, minor and major.
Mm-hmm.
There's nearly no comparison between the Democratic Party today and the Democratic Party of when it was founded, let alone in the 1890s or even the 1960s. It's a very different party than it was back then.
Yeah.
In any of those eras. Same thing with the Republicans. The parties change drastically.
Yeah.
And I think that's something you really need to appreciate about politics in general, is that things are always changing. And
what I find hilarious, though, sorry to interrupt, but it just made me think of this, is when you look back at the two Canadian political parties, it feels like they have been treading the same issues since Confederation, and their positions have only minorly varied. It's very odd. I guess like the issues are just don't go away. They're just gonna keep being the same ones because that's how countries work. But
I guess so.
Just found that very funny. Like you'd think like the issues of the first like there are some bigger issues that have like gone away. Like you aren't dealing with the fact that we don't have a Supreme Court. Like the first prime minister had to deal with that fact that he had to go to the Britain for Supreme Court issues. But nonetheless, it's like the taxes. It's like the Liberals are like, we want to raise taxes on the on merchants, and then the Conservatives are like, no, and you're like, wow, you guys haven't changed. You guys do the same thing. Liberals are like, we want public education. The Conservatives are like, no. Then oddly, the Liberals were the Conservatives were the first one to get a black guy. I don't know how that happened. Anyway, all besides the point. Carry on.
Okay, well, good discussion.
Yes.
if depressing at that.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank y'all for joining us. If you guys ever have any like interesting stories that you want us to talk about, please feel free to submit them.
Yes.
Just by commenting on really anything. We'll probably see them because we never get comments or anything. Speaking of which, we need to develop a strategy to get more viewers because, oh my God. But that'll happen another time, another day. Thank you all for joining us. Have a happy Thanksgiving if you live in the States. And as always, have malice toward none.